The ceremony was about to begin, and she was ready. More than ready. Chapter 10. The Collection Grows. Harry Potter had never owned anything that mattered to him the way the letters did. He sat in the quiet of his room at Grimmauld Place, months after that extraordinary birthday at the Burrow, carefully unfolding the collection of parchments that had become his most precious possessions. Each letter bore the evidence of frequent handling, edges softened from careful fingers, creases worn smooth from countless readings, the occasional smudge where tears had fallen during particularly difficult moments. The wooden box that housed them had been a gift from Arthur, crafted with his own hands during one of those peaceful evenings when the war felt distant enough to allow for such simple, loving gestures. It was made of warm, honey-colored wood, with brass hinges that opened smoothly and silently, and Harry's initials carved carefully into the lid. Inside, the letters rested in individual compartments lined with soft fabric, each one protected and preserved like the treasures they had become. Harry had read these letters more times than he could count. He knew every word by heart, could recite entire passages from memory, had memorized not just the content, but the particular way each family member formed their letters, the places where ink had smudged slightly, or where emotion had made handwriting less steady than usual. But knowing them by heart didn't diminish the power of reading them again. If anything, familiarity made them more precious, because each reading revealed something new, a nuance he had missed before, a connection to a current situation that made the words feel freshly relevant, a layer of meaning that only became clear with the perspective that time and experience had provided. Tonight he was reading them because tomorrow he and his friends would be leaving the relative safety of Grimmauld Place to continue their search for Horcruxes, and he needed the reminder of what he was fighting for. Not the abstract concepts of good and evil or the grand narrative of defeating Voldemort, but the specific people who loved him, the family who was waiting for him to come home, the life he hoped to have when the war was finally over. He started with Bill's letter, as he always did, because Bill's wisdom about family and belonging had become the foundation for everything else. The parchment was slightly more worn than the others. Harry had turned to Bill's words more often during the darkest moments, when he needed reminding that family was about choice rather than blood, that home was something you carried with you rather than something you could lose. Home isn't a place you can lose, Harry. It's not something that disappears just because you're not physically present. Home is the people who love you unconditionally, and that love follows you wherever you go. Harry traced the familiar words with one finger, thinking about how many times Bill's wisdom had sustained him during the long months of camping and searching and running from danger. Whenever he felt most isolated, most disconnected from everything that mattered to him, he would remember these words and understand that distance couldn't break the bonds that had been forged between him and the Weasley family. Charlie's letter came next, full of dragons and adventure, and the understanding that came from someone who had felt like an outsider but had found his place in the world anyway. Harry had returned to Charlie's words frequently, during moments when he felt most different, most burdened by the destiny that set him apart from everyone else he cared about. You don't have to deserve love, Harry. You don't have to earn your place in this family, or prove that you're worthy of the letters we've written to you. You just have to be yourself, and let us care about you because of who that self is. The concept still felt radical to Harry, even after all these months of carrying the letters with him. The idea that he could be loved simply for existing, simply for being himself, rather than for what he could accomplish or what he could sacrifice for others, remained something he had to consciously remember rather than something he instinctively believed. But the letters helped. Every time he read Charlie's explanation of how dragons responded to authenticity rather than performance, Harry felt a little more convinced that maybe, just maybe, he was worth caring about even when he wasn't saving anyone. Percy's letter had surprised him with its length and emotional honesty, and it had become increasingly relevant as Harry faced the pressure of impossible expectations and the weight of responsibilities that no 17-year-old should have to carry. Percy understood what it felt like to be held to standards that sometimes seemed impossible to meet, and his words had become a source of comfort during Harry's darkest moments of self-doubt. I want you to know that in this family, you are not expected to be perfect. You are not expected to live up to anyone else's definition of what Harry Potter should be. You are simply expected to be yourself, to treat others with kindness and respect, and to allow us to care about you in return. Harry had memorized those lines during a particularly difficult period when he had been questioning every decision he made, wondering if he was leading his friends into danger for selfish reasons, doubting whether he was strong enough or smart enough or brave enough to do what needed to be done. Percy's reminder that perfection wasn't required, that his family loved him despite his mistakes and limitations, had been exactly what he needed to hear. The twins' letter never failed to make him smile, even during the darkest moments. Their promise of lifetime partnership in mischief, their commitment to helping him find joy even in the midst of chaos, their understanding that laughter was sometimes the most powerful magic of all, these insights had become increasingly precious as the war dragged on and hope became harder to maintain. You deserve to have experiences that are purely enjoyable, Harry. You deserve to laugh until your sides hurt, to get in trouble for something completely harmless, to create chaos that brings people together, rather than driving them apart. Harry had shared pieces of the twins' letter with Hermione during some of their more desperate moments, and watching her face light up with surprised laughter at their ridiculous plans for pranking. Snape had reminded him that joy was possible even in the darkest circumstances, that hope could be maintained through humor as well as through determination. Ron's letter was the most well-worn of all, because it was the one Harry turned to most often when he needed reminding of what true friendship looked like. Ron's awkward but deeply sincere promises of loyalty, his honest admission of his own fears and inadequacies, his absolute commitment to standing beside Harry no matter what dangers they faced, these words had sustained Harry through every moment when he had been tempted to push his friends away for their own safety. You don't have to handle everything alone anymore. It means you have people who will share the burden with you, people who will stand beside you when things get difficult, people who will be there to catch you if you fall. Those lines had become Harry's anchor during the most difficult parts of their Horcrux hunt, when the locket's influence made him question everything about himself and his relationships. Whenever the darkness whispered that he was a burden to his friends, that they would be better off without him, that he was selfish for accepting their help, Harry would remember Ron's words and understand that accepting support wasn't weakness, it was what family meant. Ginny's letter had evolved in meaning as Harry's feelings for her had deepened and become more complex. What had started as surprising wisdom from Ron's little sister had become the words of someone who saw him more clearly than almost anyone else, who understood what he needed even when he didn't understand it himself. You're allowed to be 17, Harry, even in the middle of everything else, even with all the pressure and responsibility and impossible expectations. You're still allowed to be 17 sometimes. Harry had returned to these words whenever he felt guilty for wanting things that had nothing to do with defeating Voldemort, wanting to hold Ginny's hand, wanting to laugh at something ridiculous, wanting to worry about normal teenage problems instead of life and death battles. Ginny's permission to be young sometimes, to want normal experiences despite the extraordinary circumstances of his life, had become one of his most treasured insights. But it was Molly's letter that undid him every time, that never failed to bring tears to his eyes, no matter how many times he read it. Her fierce maternal love, her absolute claim on him as her son, her promises of unconditional acceptance and protection, these words had filled a hole in Harry's heart that he hadn't even fully understood existed until it was finally healed. You are my son, Harry. Not by birth, but by choice. Not by accident, but by deliberate decision. Not temporarily, but forever. Harry had to pause in his reading, as he always did when he reached this part of Molly's letter, to let the full impact of those words wash over him again. Even now, after months of carrying this knowledge with him, the concept of being someone's chosen son still felt almost too wonderful to be real. He had added his own notes to the margins of the letters over time, small observations and memories that helped him connect the written words to specific moments of warmth and belonging he had experienced with each family member. Next to Bill's advice about home, he had written, "Christmas Eve 1997, when Bill told me stories about curse breaking in Egypt, and I felt like his real little brother." Next to Charlie's insights about authenticity, he had noted, "Summer at the Burrow, when Charlie taught me to handle a baby dragon without gloves and trusted me completely." Percy's formal but sincere promises of academic support were annotated with, "After the ministry fell, when Percy came back and immediately offered to help me research protective enchantments, no questions asked." The twins' pranking schemes were surrounded by tiny drawings of fireworks and notes like, "When Fred and George sent me puking pastilles to help me get out of potions with Snape, and the day they taught me to make dung bombs, and we spent the whole afternoon laughing until we couldn't breathe." Ron's letter was covered with small hearts and notes about moments of friendship that had meant everything to Harry. When Ron came back after wearing the locket, when Ron destroyed the locket and saved my life, every time Ron chose to follow me instead of staying safe at home. These annotations had become a catalogue of loyalty that Harry could reference whenever he doubted whether he deserved such unwavering friendship. Ginny's letter bore notes about stolen moments of normalcy. Christmas morning, when Ginny and I sat by the fire and she told me about her plans for after the war. When she kissed me in the common room after we won the Quidditch match, and for 5 minutes nothing else existed. Every time she looked at me like I was just Harry instead of the boy who lived. But it was Molly's letter that bore the most annotations, small testaments to maternal love that Harry had collected like precious gems. When Molly gave me the family watch for my 17th birthday, when she hugged me after I came back from the graveyard, every morning when she made sure I had enough to eat at breakfast, the way she said, "my son," when introducing me to other people at Bill and Fleur's wedding. The letters had become more than just written words. They had become a record of love received and treasured, a catalogue of belonging that Harry could reference whenever the darkness threatened to overwhelm him. They were proof that he mattered to people, that his life had value beyond his ability to defeat dark wizards, that he had a family waiting for him to survive and come home to them. During the worst moments of the Horcrux hunt, when despair had settled over their small group like a suffocating blanket, Harry had shared carefully selected passages from the letters with Ron and Hermione. Not the complete letters, those were too personal, too precious to share in their entirety, but specific lines that seemed relevant to whatever crisis they were facing. When Ron had been struggling with the influence of the locket, questioning his own worth and his place in their group, Harry had shared Percy's words about not needing to be perfect to be loved. When Hermione had been beating herself up for not being able to solve their problems fast enough, Harry had read her the twins' insights about the importance of laughter and joy even in dark times. "Your family," Hermione had said once, after Harry had shared a particularly moving passage from Molly's letter. "They really love you, don't they?" The simple observation had made Harry's throat tighten with emotion. "Yeah," he had managed to say. "They really do." "I understand now," Hermione had continued softly, "why you're fighting so hard to get back to them. It's not just about saving the world. It's about protecting the people who chose to love you." Harry had nodded, unable to trust his voice, because that was exactly what the letters had taught him, that the war wasn't just about abstract concepts of good and evil, but about protecting the specific relationships and connections that made life worth living. Every time he read the letters, he was reminded of exactly what he had to lose if he failed, exactly what he was fighting to preserve. The letters had also become his way of staying connected to the Weasley family, during the long months when he couldn't contact them safely, when he missed them most desperately, when he worried about their safety, when he needed to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. He would read the letters and feel their love surrounding him like a protective charm. He had developed small rituals around reading them. Bill's letter was for when he needed wisdom and perspective. Charlie's was for when he felt overwhelmed by being different. Percy's was for when perfectionism and impossible expectations were crushing him. The twins' was for when he needed to remember how to laugh. Ron's was for when he doubted the value of his friendships. Ginny's was for when he needed permission to want normal things. And Molly's was for when he needed to remember that he was someone's son, that he was loved unconditionally, that he had a mother waiting for him to come home. Sometimes he read them all in order, like a litany of belonging that reminded him of every aspect of what family meant. Sometimes he selected specific letters based on what he needed to hear that day. Sometimes he just held the box and felt comforted by the physical weight of so much written love. The letters had also helped him understand his own feelings more clearly. Reading Ron's honest admission of inadequacy and fear had helped Harry recognize that those feelings were normal, that even the bravest people doubted themselves sometimes. Reading Ginny's insights about being allowed to be 17 had helped him understand that wanting normal experiences wasn't selfish or inappropriate. Reading Molly's fierce maternal protection had helped him understand what it meant to be truly loved without conditions. As the war progressed and the danger increased, the letters became Harry's most carefully guarded possessions. He had cast every protective charm he could think of on the box that contained them, had created multiple copies hidden in different locations, had memorized them so completely that even if all physical traces were destroyed, he would still carry their words in his heart. Because losing the letters would have been like losing the family itself. They were proof that the love was real, that the acceptance was genuine, that the belonging wasn't just a dream he had invented to comfort himself during dark moments. They were tangible evidence that Harry Potter was more than just a weapon in someone else's war. He was a son, a brother, a person worthy of love for his own sake. Now, on the eve of another dangerous mission, Harry carefully returned each letter to its place in Arthur's handmade box. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new tests of his courage and resolve. But he would face them with the knowledge that he was not alone, that he carried the love of an entire family with him wherever he went. The letters had taught him that home wasn't a place he could lose, but something he carried within himself. That family wasn't just about blood relations, but about the people who chose to love you completely and unconditionally. That belonging wasn't something you had to earn, but something you were given freely by people who recognized your worth. Harry closed the box gently and placed it in the magically expanded pocket of his jacket, where it would travel with him wherever the hunt for Horcruxes led. The letters had become his anchor, his compass, his reminder of everything he was fighting to protect and preserve. 7 letters from 7 people who had chosen to love him. 7 different expressions of the same fundamental truth. You belong. You matter. You are ours. It was enough to sustain him through whatever darkness lay ahead. It was enough to remind him that even in the depths of war and despair, love endured. It was enough to give him hope that someday, when the fighting was over, he would return to the family that had claimed him and discover what it meant to be truly home. The collection of letters rested against his heart, close enough to feel their warmth, constant enough to provide comfort whenever he needed reminding that he was loved. They would travel with him to the end of this war and beyond, a permanent record of the day when Harry Potter had officially become part of a family that would never let him go. 7 letters that had changed everything. 7 promises that would last forever. 7 proofs that love was the most powerful magic of all. Chapter 11. Distance and Connection. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, carried by a battle-scarred owl that looked as though it had flown through hell to deliver its precious cargo. Harry recognized the handwriting immediately, Bill's confident script, though slightly shakier than usual, and his heart clenched with equal parts relief and terror as he carefully unfolded the parchment with hands that trembled despite his best efforts to remain calm. "Harry, I hope this reaches you safely, wherever you are. I can't say much about where we are or what we're doing. Too dangerous for letters to carry such information. But I needed you to know that we're alive. Fleur and I are both unhurt, though we've seen too much fighting and lost too many good people in the past few weeks. I keep thinking about the letter I wrote you for your birthday, about the promises I made, about being your big brother no matter what happened. Those promises feel more important now than they did then. War has a way of clarifying what really matters, and what matters is this: you are still my little brother. No matter how far apart we are, no matter how dangerous things get. I need you to know that every decision I make, every battle I fight, every risk I take, it's all with the knowledge that I have a little brother out there who needs me to survive and come home to him. You've given me something worth fighting for that goes beyond abstract concepts of good and evil. You've given me family to protect. Stay safe, Harry. Stay smart. Trust your instincts and the friends who stand beside you. And remember that no matter what happens, no matter how dark things get, you have a brother who loves you and who is fighting his way back to you. I hope to see you again soon. I hope to sit in Mum's kitchen and listen to you tell me about your adventures while she feeds us both too much food and worries about whether you're eating enough. Until then, know that you are loved and missed and thought about every single day. Your brother always. Bill. Harry read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and adding it to his collection, which had grown considerably since that first birthday ceremony at the Burrow. The original 7 letters remained the foundation of the collection, preserved now in protective charms that would keep them safe even if the rest of the world burned down around them. But they had been joined by a steady stream of new correspondence as the war scattered the Weasley family across Britain, and the letters became their primary means of staying connected to each other. Each new letter brought relief, proof that another family member was still alive, still fighting, still thinking about the people they loved, and each one also brought fresh worry about the dangers they were all facing. The war had changed the nature of their correspondence. Where once the letters had been about welcome and belonging and the promise of peaceful future, now they were about survival and hope and the determination to find each other again when the fighting was over. But the fundamental message remained the same. You are family, you are loved, you are not forgotten. Harry had been carrying his letter collection with him for nearly a year now, through forests and abandoned buildings, hiding places and battlefields, dangerous missions and desperate escapes. The original wooden box that Arthur had made for him had been damaged beyond repair during a particularly violent encounter with Death Eaters outside of Manchester, cursed to splinters while Harry dove for cover behind a crumbling stone wall. He had spent 20 precious minutes after that battle crawling through rubble and debris, collecting every fragment of parchment he could find, his heart breaking as he gathered up pieces of letters that had been torn and burned and scattered by the magical explosion. Bill's wisdom about family, Charlie's insights about dragons and belonging, Percy's formal but sincere promises of support, the twins' ridiculous plans for future pranks, Ron's awkward but heartfelt declarations of loyalty, Ginny's understanding about being allowed to be 17 sometimes, and Molly's fierce maternal love, claiming him as her son forever. He had spent that entire night in a cold, damp cave, using every repairing charm he knew to piece the letters back together. Some of the damage couldn't be fully undone. There were places where words had been lost entirely, where entire sentences existed only as fragments, where the parchment remained scarred despite his best magical efforts. but he had managed to preserve the essence of each letter, the core messages of love and acceptance that had sustained him through the darkest moments of the war. The damaged letters had become even more precious to him after that night. The scars they bore were evidence of what he had endured to keep them safe, proof of how much they meant to him, reminders that love could survive even when everything else was broken and torn apart. Ron and Hermione had helped him create a new protection system after that, one that couldn't be destroyed by dark magic or physical damage. They had transcribed each letter by hand, creating multiple copies that were hidden in different locations and protected by different types of magic. They had also helped him memorize the letters completely, so that even if every physical copy was destroyed, the words would remain safely preserved in his mind. "They're not just letters anymore," Hermione had observed, as she carefully copied Ginny's handwriting onto fresh parchment. "They're like a portable home, something you can carry with you wherever you go." Ron had nodded in agreement, his own handwriting slightly unsteady as he transcribed his original letter. "Remember when I wrote that bit about always having someone to stand beside you? I had no idea how important that was going to be." Harry had watched his two best friends, his brother and sister in all but blood, working to preserve the written proof of his family's love, and he had felt overwhelmed by the realization that the letters had become important to them as well, not just as artifacts of Harry's belonging, but as reminders of what they were all fighting to protect and preserve. Since then, the collection had grown steadily as new letters arrived from family members scattered by the war. Charlie had written from Romania, where he was working with the Order to secure international support for the resistance. His letter had been full of dragon metaphors and practical advice about surviving in hostile territory, but also warm reassurances that Harry remained constantly in his thoughts and prayers. "The dragons here have taught me something about survival, Harry. They don't waste energy fighting battles they can't win, but they never give up defending what's truly important to them. You are what's truly important to me, little brother. Survive first, win second, come home to us third. Everything else is just details." Percy's addition to the collection had been the most surprising and emotionally complex. His letter had arrived during the darkest period of their hunt, when Harry had been struggling with doubt about his mission and his worth, when the weight of the Horcrux around his neck had been making him question everything about himself and his relationships. Percy's letter had been an apology and a reaffirmation all at once, acknowledging his mistakes while reinforcing his commitment to the family he had temporarily abandoned. "Harry, I have made many mistakes in my life, but the greatest was allowing my pride and ambition to blind me to what really mattered. I lost sight of family, lost sight of love, lost sight of the things that make life worth living. I nearly lost you, and all my brothers and my sister, and my parents, who never stopped loving me even when I was too foolish to deserve it. I want to add my voice to the collection of letters you received on your birthday, though I know this letter comes much later, and under much different circumstances. I want you to know that my original promises still stand, strengthened now by the knowledge of what it costs to break them. You are my brother, Harry, and I will never again let pride or politics or anything else come between me and the people I love. I will never again choose duty to institutions over loyalty to family. I have learned, painfully and at great cost, that the only duty that really matters is the duty we owe to the people who choose to love us despite our flaws. When this war is over, and it will be over, Harry, because we will make it be over, I want to be the brother to you that I should have been from the beginning. I want to earn back the trust I threw away, and I want to be worthy of the love you offered me, even when I was too blind to accept it. You have made our family stronger by becoming part of it. You have made me better by accepting me as your brother, despite my failures. And you have given me something to fight for that goes beyond abstract principles, The chance to prove that I am worthy of being called your family. With love, respect, and the promise to do better. Percy Reading. Percy's letter for the first time had broken something open in Harry's chest that he hadn't even realized was closed. The combination of apology and reaffirmation, the acknowledgement of mistakes alongside the renewal of promises, the evidence that family bonds could survive even serious breaks and betrayals. It had all contributed to Harry's growing understanding of what unconditional love actually meant. The twins had somehow managed to coordinate their letters despite being in different locations, sending Harry matching pieces of parchment that combined to form a single message when placed side by side. Their contribution to the wartime collection had been characteristically irreverent, but deeply meaningful. Dear partner in crime, we are writing this from separate hiding places. Fred is somewhere in Scotland, George is somewhere in Wales, and we're not supposed to tell anyone exactly where because it's too dangerous. But we wanted you to know that being apart hasn't diminished our commitment to corrupting you properly when this war is over. In fact, we've been using our forced separation as an opportunity to develop new and improved pranking schemes that will require your participation. We've created a list of targets. Snape, obviously, but also various Death Eaters and Ministry officials who deserve what's coming to them. And we're planning a celebration of epic proportions for when we're all reunited. More importantly, we want you to know that every joke we tell, every prank we plan, every moment of laughter we create, it's all in defiance of the darkness that's trying to swallow the world. Humor is resistance, Harry. Joy is rebellion. And family love is the most powerful form of magic we know. Stay alive, little brother. Stay safe. Stay ready to cause some truly spectacular trouble when we all get home. The war won't last forever, but our partnership in mischief will. With love and the promise of future mayhem, Fred and George, even Ron, had contributed to the growing collection, writing to Harry during a brief period when they had been separated after Ron had left, and then returned to their group. His letter had been shorter than the others, but no less meaningful for its brevity. Harry, I know you don't need another letter from me. We talk every day, and you already know how I feel about everything. But I wanted to add something to your collection anyway, something you can read if we ever get separated again. Something that will remind you what I should have said during those awful weeks when I was gone. You are the best friend anyone could ever have, and the best brother I could ever ask for. You are worth following into danger, worth standing beside no matter what happens, worth believing in even when everything seems hopeless. I'm sorry I forgot that for a while. I'm sorry I let fear and jealousy and the influence of dark magic convince me otherwise. And I'm grateful beyond words that you let me come back, that you forgave me for leaving, that you still consider me worthy of being your family, despite my failures. This is my promise, written down so you'll never have to doubt it again. I will never leave you willingly. I will never choose safety over loyalty. I will never let anything convince me that you're not worth every risk, every sacrifice, every difficult choice we might have to make. You are my brother, Harry, and brothers don't abandon each other. Not for any reason, not under any circumstances, not ever. Your brother always. Ron Ginny's letter had been the hardest to read and the most precious to receive. It had arrived during a particularly dark period, when Harry had been questioning whether he had any right to want a future with her, whether it was fair to hope for love and happiness when so many people were dying in the war he was supposed to end. My dearest Harry, I don't know where you are or what dangers you're facing, but I know you're out there somewhere, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and probably blaming yourself for everything that's gone wrong. So I'm writing this to remind you of what I told you in my birthday letter. You're allowed to want things for yourself, even in the middle of everything else. You're allowed to hope for a future where we can be together without the war hanging over us. You're allowed to dream about what it will be like when you can just be Harry instead of the boy who lived. You're allowed to believe that love is worth fighting for, that happiness is possible, that there will be a time when you can rest and be held and know that you're safe. I believe in that future, Harry. I believe in us. I believe that someday we'll sit in the garden behind the Burrow and talk about all the normal, silly, wonderful things that couples talk about when they're not worried about saving the world. I believe we'll have arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes, and lazy Sunday mornings when we don't get out of bed until noon, and quiet evenings when we read books together by the fire. I believe in those ordinary moments, Harry, and I want you to believe in them too, because you deserve ordinary happiness as much as you deserve extraordinary heroism. You deserve love that exists for its own sake, not because you've earned it or proved yourself worthy of it. You deserve to be chosen simply because you're you. Come back to us, Harry. Come back to me. Back. I'll be waiting, no matter how long it takes. With all my love, Ginny Harry had cried when he first read Ginny's letter, sitting alone in a damp forest, while Ron and Hermione kept watch nearby. He had cried because her words gave him permission to want things he had been afraid to hope for, because she believed in a future that seemed impossibly distant, because she was willing to wait for him, even though he couldn't promise when or if he would be able to come back to her. But the letter that had affected him most deeply was the one from Arthur, which had arrived just after the collection had been damaged in the Manchester battle. Arthur had somehow sensed that Harry might need extra support, extra reminding of what home meant and what family promised. My dear son, Molly told me about the letter she wrote you for your birthday, about the words she used to claim you officially as our son. I want to add my voice to hers, to make sure you understand that her feelings are completely shared by me. You are my son, Harry, not by blood, but by every other measure that matters. You are the boy I've watched grow into a man, the young person whose welfare keeps me awake at night worrying, the child of my heart who has made our family more complete simply by becoming part of it. I am proud of the man you're becoming, proud of the choices you're making, proud to call you my son to anyone who will listen. When people ask me how many children I have, I tell them 8, 7 by birth and 1 by choice, and the one we chose is just as precious to me as any of the others. Being your father means many things to me, Harry. It means worrying about your safety constantly. It means feeling proud when you show courage and kindness and integrity. It means wanting to protect you from every danger, while also knowing that part of loving you means letting you become the person you are meant to be. It means knowing that you will always have a home with us, that you will always be welcome at our table, that you will always have someone who believes in your essential goodness even when you doubt it yourself. And it means that no matter what happens in this war, no matter what sacrifices any of us have to make, no matter what losses we have to endure, you will always have a father who loves you completely and unconditionally. Come home to us when you can, son. We'll be here, waiting for you. With fatherly love and pride, Dad. The word Dad at the end of Arthur's letter had broken Harry completely. He had sobbed until he couldn't breathe, overwhelmed by the realization that he had not one, but 2 parents who claimed him, who worried about him, who considered him theirs in every way that mattered. Arthur's letter had joined the collection as perhaps its most precious addition, because it completed something that had begun with Molly's birthday letter. Harry wasn't just someone's chosen son, he was someone's chosen son with parents who both claimed him, who both loved him, who both considered him as much their child as any of their biological children. The most recent addition to the collection had come from Molly herself, written during the darkest days of the war, when the family had been scattered and communication had become increasingly dangerous. My beloved son, I don't know if this letter will reach you, but I have to try. I have to let you know that even though we're apart, even though I can't hold you and feed you and fuss over whether you're taking care of yourself properly, you are constantly in my thoughts and in my heart. Every morning I wake up, and my first thought is a prayer for your safety. Every night I go to sleep, hoping that somehow, wherever you are, you know how much you are loved. Every moment in between, I carry the knowledge that my son is out there, facing dangers that terrify me to imagine, and I send every ounce of maternal strength I possess out into the universe, hoping it will somehow find you and keep you safe. I need you to know, Harry, that nothing will ever change what I wrote in my first letter to you. You are my son, permanently and completely, and that relationship doesn't weaken with distance or time or danger. If anything, it grows stronger, because love that survives separation is love that can survive anything. When this war is over, and it will be over, my dear boy, because I refuse to believe otherwise, I am going to hug you until you complain that I'm squeezing too hard. I am going to cook you the biggest meal you've ever seen and watch you eat every bite. I am going to fuss over you and worry about you and love you in all the overwhelming, embarrassing ways that mothers love their children. And you are going to let me, because that's what sons do when their mothers have been separated from them for too long. Stay alive, Harry. Stay strong. Stay hopeful. And remember that you have a mother who will never stop loving you, never stop waiting for you, never stop believing that you will find your way home to us. Come back to me, my son. I need to hold my boy again. With endless maternal love, Mum. The collection now filled a much larger container, a magically expanded pouch that Harry carried everywhere, protected by every charm he could cast, and several that Hermione had researched specifically for preserving important documents. The original 7 birthday letters remained the foundation, but they were now surrounded by nearly 24 additional pieces of correspondence that chronicled the family's love and connection across the months of war and separation. Reading through the entire collection had become Harry's most important ritual, the thing he did whenever he needed reminding of what he was fighting for, what was waiting for him when the war ended, what made life worth living despite the darkness that surrounded them all. The letters were proof that love could transcend distance, that family bonds could survive separation, that hope was worth maintaining even when everything seemed hopeless. Each letter added to the collection had brought new insights about what family meant. Bill's continued big brother protectiveness, Charlie's steady support, and dragon-inspired wisdom. Percy's hard-won understanding of what really mattered. The twins' determination to find joy and laughter even in the darkest circumstances. Ron's unshakable loyalty and friendship. Ginny's belief in their future together. Arthur's paternal pride and love. Molly's fierce maternal devotion. Together, they formed a complete picture of what it meant to be chosen by a family, to be claimed and protected and loved without reservation. They were Harry's anchor in the storm of war, his compass when he lost direction, his hope when despair threatened to overwhelm him. The letters had also become a source of strength for Ron and Hermione, who had come to understand that Harry's family was their family too, that the love expressed in those carefully preserved pages extended to anyone Harry considered part of his chosen family. They had started carrying copies of their favorite passages, reading them aloud to each other during the hardest moments of their hunt. "Listen to this," Hermione had said, one particularly difficult evening, reading from Molly's latest letter. She says that love that survives separation is love that can survive anything. I think that applies to all of us, doesn't it? All the people we love who are scattered across the country, fighting this war in different ways? Ron had nodded, his hand moving unconsciously to the pocket where he carried his own copy of his birthday letter. Makes you understand why we're doing this, doesn't it? Why it's worth the risk and the danger and all the rest of it. Because at the end of it, We get to go back to people who love us. Harry had looked at his two best friends, his brother and sister by choice, his partners in this impossible mission, and understood that the letters had given them something too. Not just insight into his own experience of family love, but a model for what unconditional acceptance looked like, what it meant to be chosen and claimed and protected by people who considered your welfare more important than their own safety. The war had scattered the Weasley family across Britain, had put them all in constant danger, had made every day a question of survival rather than a celebration of love and connection. But the letters had kept them bound together through it all, had maintained the bonds that had been forged during peaceful times, and strengthened them through testing and separation. Every new letter that arrived was proof that another family member was still alive, still fighting, still believing that they would all find each other again when the darkness finally lifted. And every letter that Harry sent in return, carefully worded to avoid revealing location or mission details, but full of love and gratitude and determination, was his contribution to the network of communication that kept their family connected across impossible distances. The letters had taught Harry that family wasn't just about being together physically. It was about carrying each other in your hearts, about making decisions based on love rather than fear, about holding on to hope even when everything around you suggested that hope was foolish. It was about knowing that somewhere out there, people who had chosen to love you were fighting to survive so they could welcome you home when the war was over. And it was about fighting to survive yourself, not just because the world needed saving, but because you had promises to keep, and people to return to, and a family that was waiting to be whole again. The collection of letters rested against Harry's heart as he prepared for what might be their final mission, their last desperate attempt to end the war and defeat the darkness that had torn apart the wizarding world. Tomorrow they would infiltrate Gringotts Bank. Tomorrow they would steal a Horcrux from the deepest, most secure vault in magical Britain. Tomorrow they would risk everything on the hope that they could find and destroy the remaining pieces of Voldemort's soul. But tonight Harry read his letters one more time, letting the love and support and unconditional acceptance wash over him like a protective charm. Tonight he remembered what he was fighting for, not just the abstract concept of good triumphing over evil, but the specific people who had claimed him as family, who were waiting for him to come home, who had given him something worth protecting that went beyond his own life. 7 original letters from one extraordinary birthday. 24 additional pieces of correspondence written during the darkest period of the war. Nearly 30 written proofs that Harry Potter was loved completely and unconditionally by people who had chosen him as family. It was more than enough to sustain him through whatever came next. It was more than enough to remind him that love was worth fighting for, that family was worth protecting, that hope was worth maintaining, even in the face of impossible odds. The letters were his armor against despair, his weapon against the darkness that whispered that nothing mattered and no one cared. They were proof that love endured, that family survived separation, that hope could outlast even the longest and darkest winter. Harry Potter carried his family's love with him into the final battles of the war, written in familiar handwriting on carefully preserved parchment, safely guarded against his heart, where it could provide strength and comfort and the absolute certainty that he was not fighting alone. The letters would see him through to the end. And when the war was over, when the darkness finally lifted, when he could finally go home to the family that had claimed him, the letters would be there to remind them all of the love that had sustained them through the worst of times and brought them safely back to each other. Distance had tested their bonds, but love had proven stronger. War had scattered their family, but connection had endured. Darkness had threatened to destroy hope, but the letters had kept the light alive. And soon, very soon, Harry would discover what it felt like to be welcomed home by people who had never stopped loving him, never stopped believing in him, never stopped waiting for him to return to the family where he belonged. The collection was complete, the love was documented, and the war would end. Home was waiting. Chapter 12. Forever Family. 23 years had passed since that extraordinary birthday at the Burrow, and Harry Potter still read the letters. He sat in his study at Grimmauld Place on a quiet Sunday morning in late July, the familiar weight of the letter collection resting in his lap as sunlight streamed through windows that had been cleaned and opened to let in fresh air and the sounds of a neighborhood that had slowly transformed from dark and dangerous to simply old and peaceful. The house itself had undergone a similar transformation over the years. What had once been the grim headquarters of a secret resistance had become a warm family home, filled with laughter and children's voices and the comfortable chaos that came from being truly lived in. The letters themselves showed their age now. The parchment had yellowed slightly, despite all the preservation charms, and the ink had faded in places where time had touched even magic's protection. But the words remained as clear and powerful as they had been on that first birthday, when he had discovered what it felt like to be claimed by a family who loved him without reservation. Today was James's 17th birthday, and Harry had been reading through the collection as he did every year on significant occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, moments when he needed to remember where he had come from and what had shaped him into the man he had become. The ritual had evolved over the years, deepening in meaning as his understanding of love and family had grown more complex and nuanced through his own experiences as a husband and father. But today's reading felt different somehow, weighted with a significance that went beyond nostalgia or celebration. Today, Harry found himself thinking not just about what the letters had meant to him, but about what they had taught him about being family to someone else, about how the love that had been given to him so freely could be passed on to the next generation. Ginny appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of tea and wearing the soft smile that had become her default expression whenever she found him with the letters. She had learned over the years that these reading sessions were sacred to him, moments when he reconnected with the foundation of everything good in his life and remembered the people who had made his happiness possible. "James is asking if you're ready for the birthday breakfast," she said softly, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Though I suspect he's really asking if he can open his presents yet." Harry smiled, carefully closing the letter he had been reading, Molly's original birthday letter, the one that had officially claimed him as her son, and looking up at his wife. "Almost ready. I was just remembering." "Which one this time?" Ginny asked, nodding toward the collection. She had read all the letters herself over the years, had come to understand them as the foundational documents of their family's history. She knew which ones Harry turned to during different moods and occasions, which words he needed to hear when he was struggling with particular challenges. "All of them," Harry said honestly. "I was thinking about what they meant when I first received them, and what they mean now, and what I want them to mean for James and Lily and Albus." Ginny's expression grew thoughtful. "Have you decided what you're going to write him?" Harry nodded toward his desk, where a piece of fresh parchment lay beside his favorite quill, a gift from Hermione years ago that wrote in ink that would never fade, ensuring that whatever he committed to paper would last as long as the letters that had shaped his understanding of family love. "I've been thinking about it for weeks," he admitted, trying to figure out how to give him something that will mean as much to him as these letters have meant to me. How to capture in words what it means to be loved unconditionally, what it means to belong somewhere permanently. "The same way Molly did," Ginny said gently, "by being honest about how you feel and why it matters." Harry picked up one of the letters, Arthur's addition to the wartime collection, the one where he had officially claimed Harry as his son, and traced the familiar handwriting with one finger. "Your father taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, that you can become someone's son or daughter or sibling, not because of genetics, but because people decide you're worth claiming. And you've been choosing our children every day since they were born, Ginny pointed out. Not just because they're yours by blood, but because you see their worth as individuals, because you delight in who they are becoming, because you would choose them as family, even if they weren't biologically yours. Harry felt his throat tighten with emotion as he considered the truth of that observation. James, with his mischievous sense of humour and his father's tendency toward heroic gestures. Albus, with his quiet thoughtfulness and his surprising capacity for loyalty. Lily, with her fierce independence and her mother's courage in the face of injustice. He loved each of them not just as his children, but as the unique individuals they were becoming, as people he genuinely enjoyed spending time with and learning from. "I want James to understand that," Harry said quietly. "I want him to know that he's loved not just because he's my son, but because he's James, because he's funny and brave and kind, because he asks interesting questions and tells terrible jokes and has strong opinions about Quidditch tactics. I want him to know that even if he weren't my biological child, I would still choose him as family." "Then tell him that," Ginny said simply. "Tell him what you just told me." From downstairs came the sound of children's laughter and the familiar chaos of a birthday morning in full swing. Lily was probably trying to convince Albus to help her sneak a peek at James's presents, while James himself was likely bouncing off the walls with anticipation, the same kind of joyful bedlam that had characterized birthday celebrations at the Burrow, that had shown Harry what family celebrations could look like when they were rooted in genuine love and delight in each other's existence. "The letters taught me something else, too," Harry said, still holding Arthur's carefully preserved parchment. "They taught me that love isn't just about the big moments, the dramatic declarations and grand gestures. It's about the daily choice to see someone's worth, to celebrate their successes, to offer comfort during their failures, to believe in their potential, even when they doubt themselves." He gestured toward the collection, thinking about all the small details that each letter had contained. Bill's stories about family traditions, Charlie's insights about finding your place in the world, Percy's careful explanations of academic support, the twins' ridiculous plans for shared mischief, Ron's awkward but sincere promises of friendship, Ginny's understanding about being allowed to want normal things, Molly's fierce maternal protection, Arthur's paternal pride and acceptance. Each letter was full of specific promises about how they planned to love me. Harry continued. "Not just, 'We love you' in the abstract, but here's how we're going to show you that love. Here's what we're going to do to make sure you know you belong. Here's how we're going to support you and celebrate you and be there for you." That's what made them so powerful. They were practical blueprints for how to be family to someone. Ginny smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "And that's exactly what you've been doing for our children since the day they were born. Teaching them what unconditional love looks like through your actions, not just your words." Harry thought about the bedtime stories he had told, the scraped knees he had healed, the homework he had helped with, the Quidditch games he had attended, the fears he had soothed, the dreams he had encouraged, all the daily acts of love that added up to the foundation of security and belonging that he hoped his children would carry with them for the rest of their lives. "I want to start a tradition," he said suddenly, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. "I want to write each of our children a letter on their 17th birthday, like the one the Weasleys wrote for me. Something they can keep forever, something that tells them specifically how they're loved and valued, something that gives them the same kind of anchor I've had all these years." "I think that's a beautiful idea," Ginny said warmly, "though I suspect Molly will want to write letters too, and probably Arthur and Ron and everyone else who considers our children part of their family." Harry grinned, imagining the collection of letters that James might receive, not just from his parents, but from the extended family that had claimed him from birth. Uncle Ron with his characteristic awkwardness and deep loyalty, Aunt Hermione with her careful wisdom and academic support, Uncle George with his promises of mischief and mayhem, all the aunts and uncles and grandparents who had been part of James's life since his first breath, who had loved him, not because they had to, but because they chose to. James won't be the first Potter to receive birthday letters from the Weasley family, Harry realized with a laugh. He'll be getting them from people who learned the tradition from the original letters, who understand what those letters meant to me, and want to give him something similar. Full circle, Ginny observed with satisfaction. The love that was given to you being passed on to the next generation, multiplied and expanded, but still rooted in the same fundamental truth about what family means. Harry carefully returned Arthur's letter to its place in the collection and picked up his quill, feeling ready now to write his own contribution to the tradition that had shaped his understanding of love and belonging. The letter he would write to James would be different from the ones he had received. It would come from a father, rather than from chosen family. It would be rooted in biological connection, rather than deliberate adoption. But it would carry the same essential message. You are valued, you are loved, you belong. My dearest James. Harry paused, thinking about how to begin, how to capture, in opening words, what he wanted this letter to accomplish. He thought about Molly's fierce maternal love, about Arthur's paternal pride, about all the different ways the Weasley family had found to express their care for him. Today you turn 17, and I find myself thinking about what that milestone means, not just in terms of magical majority and legal independence, but in terms of who you are becoming and what kind of man you have the potential to be. I find myself thinking about the letters I received on my own 17th birthday, about the impact that written love can have on someone's understanding of their worth and their place in the world. I want to give you something similar, son. Not because you need proof of my love. I hope my actions over the past 17 years have made that clear, but because there is something powerful about having love preserved in written form. Something you can return to whenever you doubt your worth or question your place in the world. First, I want you to know that you are loved not just because you are my son, but because you are James. Because you have your grandfather's mischievous sense of humor and your mother's fierce loyalty to your friends. Because you ask thoughtful questions about things that matter and defend people who can't defend themselves. Because you inherited your great-uncle's love of pranks, but also your grandmother's instinct to care for anyone who needs caring for. You are loved because of who you are, not just because of whose son you are. I know you've grown up hearing stories about the war, about the things I did, and the choices I made, and the people I saved. But I want you to understand something important. None of those things made me worthy of love. I was worthy of love simply because I existed, simply because I was human and imperfect and trying my best to be decent. Just as you are worthy of love simply because you are you. The letters I received on my 17th birthday taught me that family isn't about being perfect or achieving impossible things. It's about being seen and valued for who you actually are, being supported through failures and celebrated through successes, being loved consistently regardless of what you accomplish or fail to accomplish. That's how I love you, James. That's how your mother loves you, how your grandparents love you, how all your aunts and uncles love you, not because of what you might achieve someday, but because of who you are right now, funny and brave and kind and absolutely worth cherishing. Harry paused in his writing to look out the window at the garden where he had spent so many peaceful mornings over the years, where he had watched his children grow and play and learn what it meant to be part of a family that delighted in their existence. The same garden where he had first understood what home could feel like, where he had learned that belonging was possible, even for someone who had spent most of his childhood feeling unwanted. I want to tell you about the moment I knew you were going to be someone special. Not special in the way the world defines special, famous or powerful or destined for great things, but special in the way that really matters. You were 3 years old, and your little brother had fallen off his toy broomstick and was crying. Instead of ignoring him or running to find an adult to help, you sat down next to him and started telling him one of the silly stories your Uncle George had taught you. You didn't heal his scraped knee or perform any magic or do anything that would impress adults. You just saw that someone was sad and decided to try to make him feel better. You chose kindness when you could have chosen indifference, and that choice told me everything I needed to know about the kind of person you were going to become. That's who you are, James. Someone who chooses kindness. Someone who notices when others are in pain and tries to help. Someone who uses humor to bring joy instead of to exclude or hurt. Someone who makes the people around him feel valued and included and cared for. These are not small qualities, son. They are the most important qualities anyone can possess, and they are the reason you will always be cherished by the people who know you. As you become an adult and begin making your own choices about what kind of life you want to build, I want you to remember that you have a foundation of love that nothing can shake. You have parents who believe in your essential goodness, grandparents who are proud of the man you're becoming, aunts and uncles who consider you one of their greatest joys. You have a family who will celebrate your successes without claiming credit for them, who will support you through failures without making them about their own disappointment, who will love you consistently regardless of what path you choose to follow. And you have a tradition now, James, the tradition of birthday letters, of written love that lasts forever, of families choosing to put their feelings into words that can be kept and treasured and returned to whenever they're needed. Someday, when you have children of your own, I hope you'll continue this tradition. I hope you'll write them letters that help them understand their worth and their place in your heart. I hope you'll pass on the love that was given to me so freely, that has been given to you since the moment you were born, that connects all of us across generations and time. But for now, I just want you to know this. You are my son, and I am proud of you in ways that go beyond achievements or accomplishments. I am proud of your character, your kindness, your sense of humor, your loyalty to your friends. I am proud of the choices you make when no one is watching, the way you treat people who can't do anything for you, the effort you put into being decent even when being decent is difficult. I am proud to be your father, James, and I am grateful that I get to watch you become the remarkable man I know you're going to be. Happy 17th birthday, my son. Welcome to adulthood. Welcome to the next chapter of your life, and welcome to the knowledge that you will always, always have someone who loves you unconditionally. With pride, love, and endless faith in who you are, Dad Harry read through the letter twice, feeling the familiar tightness in his throat that always accompanied putting deep emotions into written words. It felt honest, which was what mattered most. It felt like something James could return to years from now and still find meaningful, still find comforting, still find true. Finished? Ginny asked softly, and Harry realized she had been sitting quietly the entire time he had been writing, giving him the space to work through his thoughts and feelings. Finished, Harry confirmed, carefully folding the letter and adding it to a new collection he had been building. Letters for each of his children that would be presented on their 17th birthdays, continuing the tradition that had shaped his understanding of love and family. Ready for breakfast? Ginny asked, standing and offering him her hand. Harry nodded, but before they left the study, he turned back to look at the original collection one more time. 23 years of carrying those letters with him. 23 years of being sustained by the love they contained. 23 years of understanding what it meant to be chosen by people who valued him for himself, rather than for what he could do for them. The letters had given him more than comfort during dark times, or proof of his worth during moments of doubt. They had given him a template for how to love other people, how to be family to those who needed family, how to create the kind of belonging that lasted across time and distance and difficulty. "Thank you," he whispered to the letters, as he had done countless times over the years. "Thank you to Bill for teaching him that family was about choice. Thank you to Charlie for showing him that being different was not the same as being broken. Thank you to Percy for demonstrating that perfectionism was not required for love. Thank you to Fred and George for proving that joy was always possible, even in the darkest circumstances. Thank you to Ron for showing him what unshakable loyalty looked like. Thank you to Ginny for giving him permission to want ordinary happiness. Thank you to Arthur for claiming him as a son with such pride and delight. And thank you to Molly for loving him with the fierce protectiveness that only mothers could provide. The letters had taught him how to be the kind of father who wrote birthday letters to his children, the kind of husband who understood that love was a daily choice rather than just a feeling, the kind of friend who supported people through difficulties without judgment, the kind of person who created belonging for others because he had experienced belonging himself. Downstairs, Harry could hear the familiar chaos of a birthday celebration beginning. James's laughter mixing with his siblings' excited chatter, the sounds of family members arriving for the party, the warm buzz of conversation that meant people who loved each other were gathering to celebrate someone they all cherished. "Come on," Ginny said gently, tugging on his hand. "Your son is waiting for his birthday breakfast, and I suspect he's hoping his dad will be just as excited about his 17th birthday as everyone else's." Harry smiled, taking one last look at the collection that had shaped his understanding of everything that mattered. Then he followed his wife downstairs to join the celebration, carrying with him the knowledge that love could be preserved in written form, that family was about choice rather than blood, and that the tradition of birthday letters would continue for generations to come. The kitchen at Grimmauld Place was full of Weasleys when Harry and Ginny arrived, just as the kitchen at the Burrow had been full of Weasleys on that extraordinary birthday 23 years ago. Molly was bustling around the stove, preparing what appeared to be enough food for a small army, despite the fact that James was now old enough to feed himself perfectly well. Arthur was discussing something enthusiastically with Albus and Lily, probably sharing fascinating observations about some Muggle device he had discovered recently. Ron and Hermione were arguing good-naturedly about something, while their own children listened with tolerant amusement. George was regaling James with what sounded like a completely inappropriate story about his latest pranking exploits, while James listened with the kind of rapt attention that suggested he was taking mental notes for future reference. Percy had arrived with a stack of books that were obviously meant as birthday gifts, along with his characteristic earnest advice about the importance of continuing one's education beyond Hogwarts. Bill and Fleur were helping set the table, their own children contributing to the happy chaos that filled every corner of the room. It was exactly the kind of celebration Harry had dreamed of during those long, dark years when he thought he would never have family, never have belonging, never have people who gathered together simply because they delighted in each other's company. It was the fulfillment of every promise that had been made in those original birthday letters, every assurance that he would always have a place at the family table, always be included in celebrations and milestones, always be considered an essential part of the group. "There you are," Molly said, spotting Harry in the doorway and immediately moving to embrace him. "I was beginning to worry that you'd gotten lost in your study again." "Just finishing James's birthday letter," Harry said, accepting the hug that still felt like coming home, even after all these years. "His birthday letter?" Arthur asked, looking up with interest. "Are you starting the tradition with your own children?" "I thought it was time," Harry said, pulling the carefully folded parchment from his pocket. "I wanted to give him something he could keep forever. Something that would remind him how much he's loved." Molly's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the letter in Harry's hands. "Oh, my dear boy, That's exactly what we hoped would happen when we wrote those first letters to you. We hoped you would understand not just what it meant to be loved, but how to love others the same way. The tradition continues, Arthur said with satisfaction. Love passed on to the next generation, multiplied rather than diminished. James appeared at Harry's elbow, practically bouncing with birthday excitement. Is that for me? He asked, eyeing the letter with curiosity. Another birthday present? The most important one, Harry said, handing over the letter he had spent weeks thinking about, and the entire morning writing. Something for you to keep forever. Something to remind you how proud I am to be your father. James unfolded the letter carefully, his expression growing more serious as he read the first few lines. Around the kitchen, the family continued their cheerful chaos, but Harry found himself watching his son's face, looking for signs of how the letter was being received. When James finished reading, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his smile was radiant. Thank you, Dad, he said quietly, refolding the letter with obvious care. This is the best birthday present I've ever gotten. Better than the racing broom? Harry asked with a grin, referring to the expensive gift that was currently hidden upstairs waiting to be unwrapped. Much better, James said seriously. The broom will wear out eventually. But this letter, this I can keep forever. Harry felt his throat tighten with emotion as he realized that James had immediately understood what the letter was meant to be. Not just a birthday message, but a permanent record of love that could be returned to whenever it was needed. The same thing the original letters had been for Harry, the same gift of written belonging that had sustained him through the darkest and most difficult periods of his life. Actually, George announced from across the kitchen, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket, I also wrote you a letter, James. Figured it was time to pass on some of the Weasley family wisdom to the next generation. So did I, Ron added, looking slightly embarrassed but determined, though mine's probably not as eloquent as your dad's. And I, Hermione said, smiling warmly at James. I wanted to add my voice to the collection of people who think you're absolutely wonderful. Soon James was holding a small stack of letters, birthday correspondence from aunts and uncles and grandparents who had all understood instinctively what Harry was trying to accomplish, who had all wanted to contribute to the tradition that had played such an important role in shaping the family they had all become. This is exactly what happened to your dad, Molly said, wiping tears from her eyes as she watched her grandson discover what it felt like to be claimed by an entire family at once. The same outpouring of love, the same desire to make sure you understand how valued you are. The tradition continues, Arthur repeated, his voice warm with satisfaction. Love passed down through generations, written words that will last forever. The promise that belonging is something that can be shared and multiplied. Harry looked around the kitchen at the family that had claimed him so many years ago, at the children who had grown up knowing what unconditional love felt like, at the continuation of traditions that had taught him what family could be at its very best. The original letters had given him more than comfort or proof of worth. They had given him a blueprint for how to create love and belonging for others, how to build the kind of family that would welcome anyone who needed welcoming. And now that blueprint was being passed on to the next generation, multiplied and expanded, but still rooted in the same fundamental truth, that love was a choice, that family was about more than blood, that belonging could be created through deliberate acts of care and acceptance. James carefully tucked his collection of birthday letters into his jacket pocket, right over his heart, exactly the way Harry had carried his letters for so many years. The tradition would continue, the love would endure, and somewhere in the future, James would write letters to his own children, passing on the understanding of what it meant to be chosen and cherished and loved without reservation. The birthday celebration continued around them, full of laughter and conversation and the warm chaos that came from people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. But Harry found himself thinking about the moment 23 years ago When he had first understood what it meant to have family, what it felt like to be loved unconditionally, what it meant to belong somewhere permanently. The letters had started it all. 7 pieces of parchment covered in familiar handwriting, containing promises of love that had lasted across decades, and difficulties, and the transformation of a frightened teenager into a confident adult who knew his worth and understood his place in the world. Now those promises were being passed on to the next generation, expanded and multiplied, but still fundamentally the same. You are loved, you are valued, you belong. The collection of birthday letters would grow with each new generation, each new child who needed reminding of their worth, each new family member who needed welcoming into the fold. The tradition would endure, carrying forward the understanding that love could be preserved in written form, that family was about choice rather than circumstance, that belonging was something that could be created and shared and passed down through generations. Harry Potter had received letters that changed his life. Now he was writing letters that would change the lives of his children. The cycle of love continued, unbroken and unending, written in familiar handwriting on carefully preserved parchment that would last forever. The birthday letters were more than just family tradition now. They were family legacy, ensuring that every child who grew up in their family would understand their worth, know their place, and carry with them the absolute certainty that they were loved completely and unconditionally. Forever family, indeed.